Well, for more on the NSAS protest aftermath, the quest for an Igbo presidency in 2023 and preparations towards the general elections, the former deputy governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria and also former presidential candidate, Professor Kingsley Moghalu, joins us now. It's great to see you, Prof.
Yeah, good to see you, Leila.
So, Prof, let's start off this way. It's been exactly 1 month since the Lekki shootings, exactly 1 month today. Let's get your views on the NSAS protests that took place, what led to them, and the response that we've seen from the government.
Well, first of all, the NSAS protests were very justified, in my view, as a response to the failure of the police in Nigeria to secure the lives of Nigerians and prevent crime. And on top of that, the constant police brutality towards a lot of Nigerian citizens really showed that, the Nigerian state is a state that has become marked increasingly by impunity. And the lives of Nigerians cannot be protected. Bandits are roaming around. And so it was very justified. Whether it is in the context of end SARS or whether it's in the context of end banditry, the bottom line is that the police and the security agencies of Nigeria have failed Nigeria's citizens and are not able to protect their lives. So that's number one. It was completely justified. Now, in terms of the response to the end SARS protests from the government and some quarters, I think that there are a number of unfortunate narratives that have taken hold. The peaceful protests were absolutely correct. It's a constitutional right, and there's nothing wrong with people protesting peacefully. Now, it is normal that when peaceful protests go on for a long time, opportunistic violence will begin to happen. So there were hoodlums who were injected, many people believe sponsored, to come and disrupt the protests. And after that, we now began to saw looting. So all these things show that the Nigerian state is falling apart if care is not taken. And we should not blame the protesters, but the system should look inward and look at itself and see how is it failing the citizens of Nigeria instead of running these unfortunate narratives that it was a plot to, bring down the Buhari regime. I don't think it was any such thing. And so these kinds of divisive narratives do not help us. We should always confront our problems and our challenges and avoid excuses or passing the buck or trying to divert attention from the real issue. The Nigerian police system is ineffective, it is corrupt, it is brutal. That's the bottom line. And governance broadly in Nigeria is failing.
Let me take you up on the question of restructuring. What do you make of the fact that in some quarters, they say restructuring is invoked as a political campaign strategy or used as a ploy to oppose the government in power?
The constitutional restructuring of Nigeria back to true federalism, which is really what restructuring is about. It's about, constitutionally changing the way Nigeria is framed to become a real federation where the constituent units have enough powers to actually bring government down to the people. That's what restructuring is all about. So it's beyond politics. It is about the existence of Nigeria as an effective state. It is about the ability to govern Nigeria effectively. Without a constitutional restructuring of Nigeria, we cannot get the kind of governance we all aspire to. We all know that Nigeria is not working for anybody. It's not working for people in the north. It's not working for people in the west. It's not working for people in the east. And so, I think the matter of constitutional restructuring is foundational, and it's about the workability of Nigeria. So anybody who wants to turn it into just some sort of partisan political narrative, I'm afraid the person is just playing the ostrich. That's what I would say.
Thanks, Prof. In a recent interview, former Finance Minister Chief Olufalaye said that Nigerians should do away with talking about zoning and simply talk about restructuring ahead of the 2023 elections. He said that even a 3-term ticket zoned to the southeast would not do anything to the grave injustice that we've seen that's been inherent from the current system. On the other hand, of course, there are those that believe that we cannot move forward if we do not talk about zoning the presidency come 2023. What are your thoughts?
Well, first of all, I believe in the foundational importance of restructuring Nigeria, regardless of where the president may come from. So that's number one. But beyond that, now the matter of zoning is simply as follows. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. Nigeria's presidency has been zoned since 1999. The Southwest has had it for 8 years. The North had it with Yaradua, then the South-South, and then it returned to the North. There is no question in my mind that for inclusion, for the stability of the Nigerian state, and to see, that justice and equity is done and seen to be done, I think it would be far better if the president of Nigeria would come from the Southeast in 2023. But it must be a competent and visionary president. That's the question. This is our opportunity to combine doing equity and justice with looking for the kind of person who can take Nigeria forward as a modern 21st century country. I don't see the two as mutually exclusive. We should actually seek to combine both things in the search for our next president.
All right. Some argue that Nigeria has, since the First Republic, undergone a series of restructuring journeys without commensurate progress. Now, their stance is that the country has not consolidated on the gains of restructuring and making a conscious effort to improve on these challenges. For them, those clamoring for restructuring are looking for avenues to position themselves for relevance and wait for the opportunity to make the country dry. What's your sense of the people that have this thinking?
I think they're wrong. I think they're completely wrong. Nigeria has not been restructured. Nigeria needs to be restructured. And what it actually needs is a new constitution, you see, that has a proper and well-articulated social contract between the government and the people, and that devolves power. For example, police powers are still completely and exclusively federal powers. But they should be regional powers or state powers so that security can come closer to the people. Nigeria has a police force of 350,000 for 200 million people. That is a joke. Is it any wonder that the state people are not secure? So, the restructuring still is yet to happen. And I think there should be some sort of constitutional conference. I think the whole idea of Nigeria should be re-engineered, in a way that is acceptable to all the component parts of the federation, so that we can, know that this is what we agree on and make it possible for that agreement to be executed in our lives on a daily basis. So I am calling for a new constitution, not, tinkering with this 1999 constitution. I think it's going to have a very limited impact. There are so many issues that are foundational to Nigeria that are just being glossed over. And until we address those issues, we're not going to have the kind of cohesion as a country that we need to be able to run our economy effectively and productively, for example. The present constitution of Nigeria, as long as we operate it, Nigeria will never be able to transform its economy. It's just impossible, because the constitution as it is now is geared towards sharing. It's not geared towards producing. You cannot be sharing a cake you have not baked. We need a new constitution to help us bake a cake that we can actually share.
Thanks, Prof. You've spoken on what the key principles should be behind restructuring. And in terms of how we should restructure and constitutional proposals, you also mentioned the police force and regional powers. But let's get into that a bit more. What are some of your personal constitutional proposals when it comes to the restructuring of Nigeria?
Well, now, first of all, when it comes to the restructuring of Nigeria, you cannot have a true federation that has a 3-tier system. the federal government, the state government, and the local government. That is, generally speaking, against the principle of federalism. As far as federalism is concerned, you have a central government and you have subnational governments. Those subnational governments, I propose regions rather than states. But those subnational governments can create local governments if they wish. That's the way it should be in a federal system. There is no properly federal constitution that I have seen where you have 3 tiers of government. The only exception is India, and that was due to some very special circumstances, specific to India. But if you look at the United States, if you look at Australia, if you look at Germany, if you look at Canada, if you look at Brazil, if you look all over the world, countries that are making progress are based on this foundational principle of, federalism. That's number one. Number two, many people wonder that or believe or are afraid that, if you restructure Nigeria, it is a breakup of Nigeria. Far from it. Let's take security powers. If you devolve security powers, that is to say police powers, there should always be the army at the center, which is a national enterprise. No region should have an army. That's just a federal Nigerian institution. The central bank is should be a Nigerian institution. The foreign ministry or foreign affairs, immigration, those kinds of things belong to the central government. But other than that, the 68 items on the exclusive legislative list are too many. At least 40 to 45 of them should go down to regional governments. Now, in terms of security, for example, you should have regional police or state police. But how do you address the problem of these police forces, some rogue governor trying to now use these police forces as a regional army to challenge the sovereignty of the country? Here's what you do. This is just about smart lawyering. You will devolve police powers to states or regions, but you will create a constitutional ability for the federal government to override regional security if it is required in very exceptional circumstances. And that is if those regional police forces are being misused for political purposes. So that still retains, a certain level of central control. I don't want a weak central government. My idea of constitutional restructuring is not that we should have a weak central government. No, but we should have a proper balance between the center and the constituent parts of the country. America presents a perfect example. Nobody would call the federal government of the United States a weak government. But yet, most of the governance, 70% of the governance of the United States takes place at the state and county levels. That's just the fact. And that's why the country has progressed so much and become the most powerful country in the world, because government comes closer to the people, and therefore the people are more able to hold politicians accountable.
All right, Prof, I'm going to keep you on pause. We're going to keep you on pause. We'll come back to you later. We have our correspondent at the judicial panel sitting, Shaito. Shaito, bring us up to speed with events playing out where you are.
Okay, hello Indy, hello Leila. When we resumed at the Court of Arbitration today, we had no idea that we'll be done at 12:36 p.m. Only 2 petitioners were able to sort of testify, so to speak. The legal counsel for the police were here, and they did have a cross-examination with Mr. Ndukwe Ekekwe. That's the young man who allegedly was pushed off a 2-story building by SARS officials. Unfortunately, he had no legal counsel representing him here today. Now, let me remind you that this is the 3rd time that he has had to give testimony in court. His case has been adjourned twice, and he has refused, the family has refused to take any lawyers from the Nigerian Bar Association, as well as the NSAS legal team present here. And their lawyers have not showed up one time. So this cross-examination was really between the police legal counsel and Mr. Ndukwe Ekekwe. Well, I can kind of say that he was able to hold the questioning down. He was very bold. He was able to answer the questions. At some point, when it did get a bit feisty, Justice Okuobi had to intervene and tell the police legal counsel to take it easy on him. However, I think what is really interesting to note here is that after taking a recess of 20 minutes, the police legal counsel came back and said that they have not been able to locate any of the police officers involved in this particular case. So all the respondents are basically nowhere to be found. At this point, if the police officers are not around to defend themselves and questioned by the panel, then one wonders what is going to happen. There was a point where Justice Okuwabi did ask the Police Legal Counsel why they were being so lackadaisical about finding it, and they attributed it to the fact that they are just lawyers and they are set against a bureaucratic bottleneck system in the Nigerian police force. They also did mention that certain police officers who were respondents in this case have retired and are very difficult to find. I mean, you can imagine the disappointment that came from the two petitioners who are here today. Mr. Undukwe Ekekwe is in a wheelchair and has had to be here 3 different times. His case has been adjourned to the 4th of December. The same thing happened to the second petitioner, Mr. Olajide Owotade, who again, the Police Legal Counsel said they were not able to locate the police officers. The Justice Okuwabi did show her dissatisfaction with how they have handled the case. So it's 12:26 p.m. today, and it's been adjourned. The 2 cases have been adjourned to 4th of December and the 1st of December, respectively.
All right. Okay. Go ahead, Leila.
Thanks, Shaitan, for bringing us up to speed with that. It's getting quite daunting and tormenting almost, the way in which this is going on at the moment. But what's on the agenda for the rest of today?
That's what I was trying to say to you earlier, Leila. I honestly feel like this is it for today. If the Police Legal Counsel cannot produce the police officers, the next point of this panel is supposed to question the respondents in this case. And if they are not present, and Mr. Olajide Owotade, they've given their testimony on 2 separate accounts now. So at this point, it's really about hearing from these police officers. And if they're not here, fortunately, the panel is going to have to adjourn to the next days. Like I said earlier, Justice Okuwabi did show her dissatisfaction. She was quite upset. She felt as if she did mention that this was just 2 cases out of 100 cases that they had to try, and they had just 6 months to do it. So they can tell how frustrated the panel is with the fact that these police officers were not here today.
Yeah, it looks like it's going slowly. Let me ask you 2 questions. You answer briefly. One is why Ndukwe Ekekwe is insisting he doesn't need any lawyer, either from the NBA or from anywhere for that matter. And then secondly, when are they adjourning to? Briefly.
Okay, of course. Honestly, I can't speak to that. I have been there when the family has been offered lawyers from the NSAS team as well as the Nigerian Bar Association, but they are insisting that they would like to go ahead with their own lawyer, who, like I said, has not showed up. So I can't really speak to their thinking. All I can say is that they have been offered lawyers. And of course, in the case of Mr. Undukwe Ekekwe, his case has been adjourned to the 4th of December, while Mr. Olajide Owotade's case has been adjourned, to the 1st of December.
Okay. Many thanks, Arise correspondent Shaitan Atigarin, for bringing us up to speed with what's going on today at the Lagos State Judicial Panel of Inquiry. Let's bring our guest back in, Professor Kingsley Moghalu, the former Deputy Governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria and also former presidential candidate. We've been looking at restructuring, the conversation around an Igbo presidency in 2023 and zoning, and also, of course, end SARS. Prof, I'm sure you just got to see what our correspondent Shaitan Atigarin had to say. She's been covering the Lagos State Judicial Panel of Inquiry 3 times a week since it started. I'd like to get your views on what she had to say, and also the investigations into the Lekki shootings. Like I said at the start of this conversation, it's 1 month today. Prof, how hopeful are you that we're going to get to the bottom of what happened?
I think we ought to get to the bottom of what happened. Whether some of these processes will be able to achieve that, as opposed to a more robust, independent inquiry, which could be made up of national elements, but maybe even some international element from the point of view of human rights, I think is very essential. If I'm to look at some of the things coming out of the government, some of the statements, there's a lot of denial. The Nigerian government is living in denial because the shootings at Lekki are a very big demonstration of the character of the Nigerian state. And, the problem with some of these inquiries is that they become, while they may be helpful to air what's going on, they may become shows which do not go to the root of the problem at the end of the day. The Nigerian police is not being held accountable. The Nigerian security forces are not being held accountable. There is a lot of denial. There's still a lot of arrogance on the part of the Nigerian state towards its citizens. And that's a foundational thing. And I'm not very sure whether these commissions of inquiry are going to be able to address that in substantively. So I do think, these things are a response, but how helpful they will be at the end of the day, we have yet to see. It is about the tone from the top. It's about the vision, about what actually, for example, when NSAS started and those shootings happened, I believe that the Inspector General of Police ought to have resigned or have been asked to resign. These are the kinds of things that President Buhari will do, and it becomes very clear that he's serious. But people denying whether there were shootings at Lekki, whereas we've seen all the evidence with us and around the world, I think tells you that maybe, the intentions are not really what they ought to be. So that's my view of the response to NSAS. But I wanted to come back a little bit to restructuring, if you don't mind.
I want to continue on that trajectory.
Yeah.
So I want to take you back to it. Then, of course, you can add what you wanted to say earlier. While you were speaking earlier, you talked about acceptability, which is quite interesting. And that's where I'm taking my next question from. The fact that it's looking like restructuring is particularly accepted in the South, while the opposite is the case in the North. You and I know that in life, it's about negotiation. It's about disagreeing to agree.
Absolutely.
So how do you then get both extremes to come to a meeting point?
That's a very good question. First of all, I'd like to disabuse the notion that the North is against restructuring. I don't think that is true. I know many people, many compatriots from the North who themselves are calling for restructuring. We have seen statements from the Northern Elders Forum, from people like Hakeem Baba Ahmed and so on, showing very clearly their support for the idea of a constitutional restructuring of Nigeria. So we should avoid all these myths and stereotyping, that the North does not want restructuring. It's a negotiation. And I believe the way to proceed with it is to say to those who are opposed to restructuring, who are now smaller and smaller in number as each passing day goes by, here is how restructuring will work for everyone. Restructuring will actually help the northern part of this country to actually begin to develop economically, to have much more functional education systems. Because the problem with restructuring is that it makes everybody focused on the power of the federal government to exploit mineral resources and share those mineral resources. So it it just spreads laziness and poverty all around the country. So this is the reason why restructuring is better for everybody in Nigeria, because it will set the Nigerian economy free. Regions will be able to control their own natural resources, including the northern states. There's so many solid minerals that are available in northern Nigeria, which have not even been exploited at all. But I would say that with restructuring and you have resource control. The age of oil is passing. It's becoming a thing of the past. So restructuring actually will favor the North, maybe even more than the South. But so it's a big opportunity. That is what I would say. And in handling those natural resources, they should not make the mistake that we made with oil. There must be processing of every natural resource in Nigeria before it's exported. That is what creates the wealth of nations. If you export crude oil, crude gold, crude whatever, you will never be wealthy. So this is the secret, and we must, in a new constitution, address these kinds of things. So I would simply say, here's why restructuring is necessary for all of us, and it is better if it's done on a regional basis rather than on a state basis. Here's the argument. From a standpoint of economies of scale, there is no region, northeast, northwest, southwest, southeast, south-south, today in Nigeria that cannot become a prosperous economy. You have large numbers of people who can make up a good market. You have large numbers of people who could create an industrial base. So it's better if it's regional, because it's better economically from that standpoint. So that's what I would say. Now, there are some people who are opposed to restructuring. There is a small political elite, some in the North, but I don't think they represent the views of the whole North. This is just a political elite that has benefited from the current dysfunctional state in Nigeria. So it's a selfish and isolated perspective on restructuring. It does not represent the views of many Northerners. Everybody, like, look at the insecurity, look at the banditry in Northern Nigeria today. The state is collapsing, and it's obvious to everybody. So, and the solution is also obvious. It's about the political will to have the solution. And if that will is not there, the citizens need to drive that will and drive pressure that will make that will to resurrect and to face the problems. That's what leadership is about. And in doing so, you can say to some people who are concerned about being yanked off, from oil revenues, immediately the country is restructuring. There could be a transitional period, and it could be about 7 years, to prepare some of those economies or some of those states in Nigeria that are not viable to become viable enough to stand on their own. So there could be a transitional period. Now, the other point I want to, and when it comes to resource control, I want to be clear. The regions should control every natural resource found on their soil. But from there, they can pay the government, the federal government, about 30 to 40% of the revenues they get, so that the entire federation can be administered as a sovereign country. The other point I want to make about constitutional restructuring is this. It is an opportunity to separate the Nigerian state from religion. You should separate the state from religion, because there are several religions in Nigeria. And where you have one particular religion being reflected a lot in a constitutional document, but other religions are not, then you create immediately an impression and a reality that the country is favoring one religion over others. And that we should avoid if we want peace and security and stability.
Thanks, Prof. You said the way to proceed is to say here that, look, restructuring is going to work for everyone, and this is how it's going to work for everyone. But we also know that realistically, it's not going to be that. It's not going to be that easy. Prof, I wanted to ask you, does this come down to leadership? And if so, how do you see this changing or affecting the state of play as we go into the next elections? And also, realistically, when do you actually see us starting to go down that restructuring road?
Yes, that's a very good question, Leila. I think it all comes down to leadership, because a real leader has vision. A real leader takes calculated risks that are managed carefully. A real leader has a dream or a vision and the ability to move citizens from where they are onto the direction of where we all agree we can be going, because that leader is able to manufacture consent, able to put out ideas and argue those ideas, and we can all see why those ideas are better for all of us. So the leadership issue is critical, and there is a big leadership deficit in Nigeria today. We have lots and lots of politicians in Nigeria, but they are not leaders. If they were real leaders, Nigeria would not be in the state it is today. There's a very big difference between politics and leadership. But Nigerians conflate the two. And Nigerian citizens have been, brained into believing that politicians are leaders. We've got a lot of politicians, but they are no leaders. So leadership is a separate thing. Politics is a path to leadership in a democracy. But the very quality of leadership, vision, courage, political will to do the right thing, competence, is absent all too often. So, I think that, we should, in 2023, we should be looking for leaders and de-emphasize politics. People should vote for individuals rather than just political parties, because we've seen that following many of these big political parties has become a bandwagon to nowhere. We haven't made any progress because we've been voting for APC. We haven't made any progress because we've been voting for PDP. Nobody in APC or PDP, in terms of the traditional political class, can take Nigeria forward, except there is an injection of new minds and new visions into those parties. You're not going to expect anything different, from them. So I think we should be looking more now at individuals in terms of providing leadership for Nigeria. Our democracy is still young. It's not philosophically based. You don't know what APC or PDP stands for. Nobody on the street can tell you that. They're just machines.
All right.
To acquire power.
Well, Prof, the question will be, are the people matured enough to begin to look for single individuals without party affiliations? Well, thank you so much for your time on Newsday. Professor KINGSLEY Moghalu, former Deputy Governor of the CBN.